everyone, welcome to another Animation Friday, and today I thought it would be interesting to briefly discuss adult oriented content animation, or animation for adults. Now, I'm trying to open this up to being fairly broad and sort of discuss what I would consider to be the first technically animated film for adults, or really the first full-length animated film, or first significantly popular animated film that I think was more centered around adults, and that was Fantasia. Fantasia is a piece that largely does focus more on an adult audience, because there's nothing really necessarily geared towards kids, unless you count the Sorcerer's Apprentice segment, or maybe even the Pegasuses section, where the Pegasuses are all really cute and having fun. Beyond that, in large part, Fantasia was dedicated to adult audiences, because it was largely trying to focus on more, I think, adult concepts that might be challenging for kids to maybe fully grasp or fully understand the meaning behind them. Even things that might be even emotionally simplistic, kids might not understand it in the same capacity as adults do. So again, I guess I would argue that Fantasia was probably the first to attempt a style of animation that was a little bit more geared towards adults, and a tone that was more geared towards adults. And then we saw within animation history, like I mentioned in my history of animation video, where in the 70s we had this revival for, or not really necessarily a revival, but a focus on trying to appeal to adults through animation. And largely that was due to the fact that animation was not necessarily at its best during the 70s, and it only makes sense that this underground kind of material came out as a result within the 70s. That was more geared towards adults and adult audiences, and wasn't focused on trying to be really largely kid-friendly. And now we have, basically in the later 90s and all through the 2000s, we've seen animation really take off for adults. Shows like The Simpsons being probably the biggest one. That really did, I think, start this trend of animation going more towards adult audiences, or at least more teenage audiences too. By, again, putting in more crude humor, putting in more adult jokes, things like that. A large part I would attribute to The Simpsons in particular. And then after that, we got shows like Family Guy, that is pretty much almost the same as The Simpsons, but maybe just a little bit more ridiculous, and focuses on different types of humor as opposed to The Simpsons. So again, it really depends on what you kind of lean towards when it comes to adult animated comedy, but a larger portion of it was focused in on trying to be comedical and trying to bring some comedic value, because because animators and people who like adult-oriented content, like Seth MacFarlane and the people that were behind The Simpsons, they saw that there was really a market for this, because there are so many things that you can do with animation, and you can get away with so much within animation and create a lot of, I think, shock value. And as a result, I think this is where we see these kinds of shows really taking off, because they have this ability to reach their audience and do so in a way that wouldn't really work in a real life setting where you have actors and a sort of production behind the comedy. And then after, I think it was first The Simpsons, and then we had Family Guy, and I think there's been other sort of more underground, adult-oriented animation, like I think Aqua Teen Hunger Force, I guess, is sort of underground. I've never watched the show. I've just heard of it. And Robot Chicken, again, haven't really watched it, but I guess I consider it animation, even though it's more stop motion, I think. But again, still you see these kinds of shows really emerging and taking off, and as a result, gaining a lot of audience feedback. And I think after Family Guy, eventually Archer became popular, and also you had shows like Futurama that were fairly popular. Those kinds of shows are really the ones I wanted to focus on today. Now, are these shows good quality? I mean, I've always heard both ends of the spectrum. Like, oh, I think Family Guy is horrible, and oh, I don't particularly care for The Simpsons. And then I'll hear people on the other end who will say, oh yeah, I think Family Guy is great, and I think it's hilarious, and there are these sort of, I think, divides that happen when it comes to, I think, more adult-oriented content, because I think there's just different kinds of humor, and some people may not appeal to this adult animation type humor, because again, what we can do with animation is not what we can do in real life. So I think it only makes sense that certain audiences would gravitate or not gravitate towards them for just that reason alone to start off with. And there's also some reasons too, like with the writing, and with putting in maybe too much crudeness. That doesn't go too far at times. Yeah, I would say that sometimes it can. I mean, I think everybody though has their sort of limit, their own understanding of where they draw the line in the sand, and it might not be the same as somebody else. Somebody else might think it's still hilarious, and don't think that it's trying to be downright offensive or hurtful. And again, we can also put in South Park in there too, because they pretty much make fun of everybody. But yes, these kinds of shows, though, regardless of whether you like them or not, have drawn a huge appeal from people. People seem to really remember these shows. People still watch these shows. And you might ask, well, why? Well, what's the appeal of this adult content that is in animation form? I think one, again, like I've said before, there is a lot more shock value that you can create by just putting things within the animation or animated medium. And also, I think in large part what it has to do with is the fact that that adults, even sort of young adults, teenagers, I think gravitates towards these kinds of shows because, again, they're not for kids, but they look like something that would be for kids. And I think that's why you see this kind of transitioning, and once kids are going into adulthood, they're more watching these kinds of other animated shows that are, in large part, more for adult audiences. and not for kid audiences. And I think largely the success of The Simpsons, largely the success of shows like Family Guy, Archer, Futurama, Aqua Teen Hunger Force, Robot Chicken, South Park, a lot of that, I think, has come from this teen demographic. This teen demographic is really what launched these shows into the mainstream. They're the ones that really contributed to bringing forth this idea that, no, it's not only for kids. It can be for adults, too, and adults can laugh at them, and adults can enjoy them. Now, it's not to say that adults can't enjoy kid content. Of course they can. It's just that sometimes as an adult, you like to see things that are more oriented towards where you are within life, and a lot of these adult-oriented content provide you a better understanding of comedy than something that is more geared maybe towards kids, because with kids it's a little bit more simplistic and maybe not as crude. Again, this largely, I think, really stemmed from this teen demographic, this desire to have something that's kid-like, that looks like something that kids would watch, but within the content, it's more for adults. It's more for adults that want to focus on humor, and on adult humor, and on adult jokes, and adult circumstances, and, things that kids wouldn't really understand. That there was really a desire for this, I think. And people started to, I think, really realize it within this era, within the later 90s. And we decided, I think, to really all go out with it and really embrace this idea that we can make adults laugh too, and we can make shows that are oriented more for adults but are in the animation medium. And again, I think largely was the teens. A lot of teenagers thought that these shows were really great in their mixture, because you have animation clothing, but all adult-oriented, crude humor to soak you up underneath it. So that's really what got them, and I think that's really what we see happening, and why I think you even see, I think even younger, like pubescent teens, even already watching more adult-oriented content, but again, more animated adult-oriented content. So I think that only makes sense. It only makes sense that we would want something childlike, but that we would want something that's more for adults within that cartoon setting. So what can be said that is good and bad about these kinds of shows? Well, a lot of them are crude. A lot of them are more focused towards comedy. They're not focused on drama or really romance or anything. They're more focused on the genre of comedy. So there's really not a whole lot of breathing room, at least with animation, when it comes to having your demographic be adults, because largely adults go to animation for humor, and to be entertained through humor, because, again, shock value. You could say, too, that maybe, some cartoons maybe have focused a little bit more, or that were more for adults, focused in a little bit more on drama. Again, like something like Fantasia. But I think large portions, if you look at the majority of the cartoon shows that are geared towards adults, largely comedic, largely about making laugh, not really about creating really a full-length feature film, although they do make sometimes full-length features, like I think Family Guy's had a couple of movies, but again, nothing that's hit theaters, I think. So again, there's all those kinds of things that come up. Oh yeah, the Simpsons movie though too. That still came out, so I think made a decent amount of money, and I heard was fairly decent. But yeah, a lot of it, regardless of whether it is a television show or a film, largely for adults, it's comedy. It's nothing. It's just something that I think they knew that they could execute really well, and utilize that genre as opposed to focusing on other genres. And although I think it would be interesting if we saw more animation that was more serious and more for adults, and not be so comedic, but that's largely what animators have chosen to focus on. So what else can be said? The good and the bad and the ugly. I think the good aspects of adult animation are, again, kind of providing people with that transitioning from childhood to adulthood. Again, because a lot of the shows that were animated really did stem from a lot of teenagers really getting invested in them. So I think there is that good aspect of trying to introduce children to more adult-oriented content, and that have sort of meaning and context that adults would understand. I think South Park has largely done this kind of comedy. You could say even Family Guy and The Simpsons, they focused on it too. So again, I think having that kind of transitioning is okay, and I don't think it really hurts. It hurts kids, or adults for that matter. But what's the bad? I guess the problem that I have with a lot of the adult-oriented content is again, like I mentioned before, it's really focused in on one genre. It doesn't focus really on other genres of film or television shows. They're just largely comedic based, which I think is a shame, because I think we could have different adult-oriented content that is within the animated medium. But I guess sometimes, again, like I mentioned before, the people saying that there's a lot of crude humor within these shows, and that some people just can't stand Family Guy or can't stand The Simpsons or whatever, because of the crudeness, or because there's just too much shock and too much awkwardness and maybe too much stupidity too, because again, these characters that they create are really not all the brightest people. But despite that, I think even though these characters and these settings and these plots and stories, they even though they do have crudeness, and even though maybe the quality doesn't necessarily match up to maybe what the shows used to offer, I think that I think people have the right to their opinion personally, and into thinking that a lot of this humor is crude. I personally don't mind it all that much. I kind of always given humor a little bit of slack. Again, though, I understand that a lot of it is shock value based and really centered on being completely ridiculous, and I understand that, and I understand if people don't like that humor and don't like that kind of comedy. For me, it works, and it doesn't work sort of at the same time. There are points where I feel like, yeah, it's a little bit crude. Yeah, that joke really wasn't all that funny, you know. But at the same time, there's still some genuine, I think, funny moments within these kinds of shows, and they do have their bits where I think they really do shine. So I kind of see both ways, but I'm not really all that extreme when it comes to these kinds of shows. I'm not a devout fan of one show or another. I mean, I will watch occasionally, but again, my point being is that I don't think, yes, I think they can be a little too crude, but at other times I think the crudeness is warranted and the shock value is good and is fun to watch. But there might be others who will say the opposite. But I think that's really all, though, I can say when it comes to these shows. If there are any questions, comments, concerns, I'd be more than happy to answer them. But yeah, whatever you like, whatever you dislike about these shows, I respect your opinion. But personally, with my opinion, it's kind of like a hit or miss with all of the shows. At least the ones that I've watched, sort of hit and miss. But either way, I hope that these shows continue. I hope we do have more animated, adult-oriented content, because that content is, I think, fun. I think it is a really good genre to explore, especially when you want to appeal to the teenage demographic. Ooh, if you want to appeal to the teenage demographic, make an animated show oriented for adults. Do it, and you will get tons and tons and tons and tons and tons and tons of teenagers behind you, because again, it's that whole transitioning, that whole going through the various stages within life, and teenagers wanting to be more like adults will watch adult animation, and it's just that simple. It's just that simple fact is what made these shows so popular, and what continues to make them really popular. But ultimately, I think that's really all I can say. But if there are any questions, comments, concerns, more than happy to answer them. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a great day, week, month, and year. And I hope to see you all in the next video. Take care. Bye-bye.